On a bitter February morning in 1989, in the small coastal town of Westerly, Rhode Island, a young woman named Christine Cole vanished without a trace. She was 23 years old, a waitress at the local diner, known for her bright smile and her dreams of attending nursing school. She left her apartment at 7:15 in the morning to walk the 6 blocks to work, as she did every Tuesday. Her shift started at 8. She never arrived. The winter air was sharp that day, the kind that stings exposed skin and turns breath into visible clouds. The streets were empty in that early hour, the sky still holding the gray pallor of dawn. Someone saw her, someone took her, and for 36 years that someone walked free, hidden in plain sight while a family slowly came undone. What happens when the person you trust most is the one you should have feared? The town of Westerly sits tucked against the southwestern corner of Rhode Island, where the state meets Connecticut, and the Atlantic Ocean carves its restless boundary. In 1989, it was a town of 21,000 souls, a place where fishing boats still left before sunrise and textile mills stood empty along the Pawcatuck River, relics of an industrial age that had passed. The downtown stretched along High Street, lined with brick storefronts, a pharmacy that had been there since 1903, a hardware store where men gathered on Saturday mornings to discuss weather and sports, and Millie's Diner, where Christine Cole worked 5 days a week, pouring coffee and remembering orders without writing them down. Christine lived in a second-floor apartment on Granite Street, a narrow lane that ran parallel to the railroad tracks. The building was old, the kind with radiators that clanked through the night and windows that rattled when trucks passed. She shared the space with her roommate, Denise Callahan, also 23, who worked the night shift at the hospital. They saw each other in passing, leaving notes on the refrigerator, splitting the rent down the middle. Christine's bedroom faced east, and on clear mornings, light would pour through the thin curtains and wake her before her alarm. She had grown up 20 miles north in the town of Hope Valley, the youngest of 3 daughters born to Robert and Eleanor Cole. Her father worked for the state highway department. Her mother taught 2nd grade at the elementary school. Christine had been a quiet child, the teachers said, always reading, always drawing in the margins of her notebooks. After high school, she had moved to Westerly to be closer to the ocean, to feel the salt air, to imagine a future larger than the one her small town could contain. She saved her tip money in a ceramic jar shaped like a cat. By February of 1989, she had saved nearly $2,000 toward tuition. The morning of February 7th began as it always did. Christine woke at 6:30 to the sound of her alarm clock, a small digital unit that glowed red in the darkness. Denise had come home an hour earlier and was already asleep in the other room. Christine showered, dressed in her work uniform, black pants, white button-up shirt, her name tag pinned just above her heart. She made instant coffee in the kitchen, standing at the counter, looking out the window at the street below. The temperature that morning was 19 degrees. The forecast called for snow by evening. She pulled on her winter coat, a navy blue parka her mother had given her for Christmas, wound a scarf around her neck, and left the apartment at exactly 7:15. The walk to Millie's Diner was simple and routine. Down Granite Street to the corner, left on Canal Street for 3 blocks, then right on High Street. The diner sat on the corner of High and Elm, its neon sign visible from half a block away. The distance was 6/10 of a mile. On an average morning, Christine walked it in 12 minutes. She preferred walking to driving, she had told Denise. She liked the quiet, the way the town looked in that early light before the day fully began. At 7:19, Mrs. Dorothy Brennan, who lived on Canal Street, saw Christine walking past her house. She was certain of the time because she had just finished watching the morning news, which ended at 7:15, and had gone to the window to check the weather. She saw Christine walking at her usual pace, hands in her pockets, head down against the cold. Mrs. Brennan would later tell investigators that Christine looked exactly as she always did. Nothing seemed wrong, nothing seemed different. At 7:23, a mail carrier named Frank Delaney saw a young woman matching Christine's description, standing near the corner of Canal and Prospect Street. He was sorting mail in his truck, preparing for his route. He noticed her because she appeared to be waiting for someone, looking up and down the street. He thought perhaps she was waiting for a ride. He continued his work and didn't look again. Christine Cole never arrived at Millie's diner. By 8:15, the owner, Mildred Harper, called Christine's apartment. The phone rang and rang. Denise, deep in sleep, didn't hear it. Mildred assumed Christine had overslept, that she would arrive late and apologetic. But when 9 o'clock came and Christine still hadn't appeared, Mildred felt the first stirrings of worry. Christine had never missed a shift without calling. Never. By 10 o'clock, Mildred drove to Christine's apartment and knocked on the door. Denise answered, groggy and confused. No, she said, Christine had left for work hours ago, just like always. The two women stood in the doorway, the cold air rushing in, and exchanged a look that carried the weight of shared, unspoken fear. Something was wrong. Denise called Christine's parents. Robert Cole answered on the second ring. His voice, when Denise explained, went quiet in a way that made her hands shake. He and Alina drove to Westerly immediately, their car speeding along Route 138, Alina gripping the door handle, Robert's jaw clenched so tight it ached. They arrived at the Westerly police station at 11:30 and filed a missing person report. The officer who took the information, Sergeant Paul DeMarco, wrote down the details methodically. White female, 5'4", 115 pounds, brown hair, green eyes, last seen wearing a navy blue parka and black pants. He asked the standard questions. Any history of running away? Any boyfriend troubles? Any reason she might want to disappear? Robert Cole's voice was steady but hard. My daughter doesn't run away. Something happened to her. The search began that afternoon. Officers canvassed the route Christine would have walked, knocking on doors, asking residents if they had seen anything unusual. Most had been inside, staying warm, preparing for the day. No one reported hearing screams or seeing a struggle. Clear as throat, the silence was absolute, as if Christine had simply stepped through some invisible door and vanished. By evening, volunteers had gathered at the community center. More than 60 people, neighbors and strangers alike, divided into teams and walked the streets with flashlights, calling Christine's name into the frozen air. They searched alleys and empty lots, looked behind dumpsters, checked the river banks. The snow began falling around 6 o'clock, soft and steady, covering footprints, covering everything. The police brought in search dogs the next morning. German shepherds trained to track scent, their handlers guiding them along Christine's known route. The dogs picked up her trail on Granite Street, followed it along Canal, but lost it completely near the intersection of Canal and Prospect, the same corner where Frank Delaney had seen a young woman standing. The dogs circled, confused, unable to find the scent again. It was as if Christine had been lifted from the earth at that exact spot. Investigators began interviewing everyone Christine knew. Her roommate, her coworkers, her family, her friends. They learned she had been dating a man named Michael Barrett, 31 years old, a construction supervisor who lived in the neighboring town of Charlestown. They had met the previous summer at a barbecue hosted by mutual friends. Those who knew them said the relationship had been good at first, that Michael seemed attentive, that Christine had seemed happy. But in recent months, some had noticed changes. Christine had become quieter, more withdrawn. She had canceled plans. She had stopped talking about the future. Denise told investigators that Christine had mentioned breaking up with Michael. She said he was getting too intense, Denise explained, sitting in the small interview room at the police station. She said he wanted her to move in with him, but she wasn't ready. She wanted to focus on school. Denise's hands twisted in her lap. She said he didn't take it well when she told him. Michael Barrett was brought in for questioning on February 9th, 2 days after Christine disappeared. He arrived at the station in his work truck, still wearing his construction boots, dust on his jeans. He sat across from Detective James Callahan and Detective Linda Morrow, his expression calm, his hands folded on the table. He answered their questions without hesitation. "When did you last see Christine?" Detective Callahan asked. "Sunday night. We had dinner at her place. I left around 9. "How did she seem?" "Fine, normal. We talked about maybe going to see a movie the next weekend." "Did you have any arguments, any disagreements?" Michael shook his head. "No. Everything was good between us." Detective Morrow leaned forward slightly. "We've heard that Christine wanted to end the relationship. Is that true?" Michael paused just for a moment. "She mentioned needing space. She's been stressed about money, about school." I understood. "I wasn't pressuring her." "Where were you on Tuesday morning, February 7th, between 7 and 8? "At home. I didn't have to be at the job site until 9 that day. I was getting ready, had breakfast, left around 8:30. "Can anyone confirm that?" "I live alone, but I stopped for gas on my way to work, the station on Route 1. They might remember me." The detectives checked. The gas station attendant vaguely recalled someone matching Michael's description, but couldn't confirm the time. The receipt, if there had been one, was long discarded. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves after the interview. Something about Michael Barrett's demeanor troubled them. He was too composed, too steady. Grief, fear, confusion, these were the normal reactions when someone's partner vanished. Michael showed none of these. He answered questions like a man reciting a grocery list. The investigation expanded. Detectives examined Christine's finances, her phone records, her daily habits. They interviewed the mail carrier, Frank Delaney, who described seeing the young woman waiting at the corner. They interviewed Mrs. Brennan, who was certain she had seen Christine walking past her house. The timeline was tight, compressed. Christine had been seen at 7:19. Someone had possibly seen her at 7:23. Then nothing. On February 15th, 8 days after Christine vanished, a bloodhound team was brought in from Connecticut. The dogs were given an item of Christine's clothing, a sweater from her apartment. They tracked her scent to the corner of Canal and Prospect, just as the previous dogs had. Then one of the dogs, a large male named Brutus, veered suddenly toward a parking area behind an abandoned warehouse. He stopped at a patch of gravel, circled twice, and sat, the signal that he had found something. Officers searched the area meticulously. They found tire tracks, partially obscured by snow and foot traffic. They found a button, small and white, the kind used on women's blouses. Eleanor Cole later identified it as matching the shirt Christine had been wearing. They found nothing else. No blood, no weapon, no body. The button was sent to the state crime lab. Analysis confirmed it had been torn, not cut, torn away with force. Michael Barrett's vehicle, a dark green pickup truck, was examined. It had been recently cleaned, the interior scrubbed. "I detailed it the weekend before," Michael explained when asked. "I do that every few weeks. I keep my truck clean." The odometer showed he had driven 17 miles on the morning of February 7th. From his house in Charlestown to the job site in Westerly was 12 miles. An extra 5 miles, unaccounted for. When confronted with this, Michael shrugged. "I must have taken a different route. I don't always go the same way." But the discrepancy gnawed at investigators. 5 miles was not insignificant. 5 miles could be the distance to an isolated road, a hidden spot, a place where someone might never be found. The media descended on Westerly. News crews from Providence, from Hartford, parked their vans along High Street and filmed segments in front of Millie's diner. Christine's photograph appeared on the evening news, her high school graduation picture, her smile wide and hopeful. The anchor's voice was solemn. A young woman vanished without a trace. A community searches for answers. If you have any information, please contact the Westerly Police Department. Tips flooded in. Someone claimed to have seen Christine at a bus station in Providence. Another said they saw her getting into a red car. All the leads were investigated. All led nowhere. Weeks turned into months. The snow melted. Spring arrived. bringing green to the trees and warmth to the air. Christine's apartment remained as she had left it, her belongings untouched, her ceramic cat full of coins sitting on the shelf. Her parents paid the rent for 3 months, hoping she would return, needing to believe she would walk through the door. Finally, in May, they packed her things into boxes and brought them home. The case grew cold. Detectives moved on to other investigations. The volunteers stopped searching. The news crews went elsewhere. Life in Westerly continued, but something had changed. Parents held their children closer. Women walked in pairs. Trust, once assumed, became fragile. Michael Barrett continued working, continued living his life. He dated other women. He bought a house. He attended town meetings and helped coach Little League. Those who knew him said he seemed fine, normal, unbothered. But there were some who watched him with narrowed eyes, who whispered behind closed doors. There was something about him, they said, something they couldn't name. 5 years passed, then 10. Christine Cole's case file gathered dust in the evidence room. Her parents grew older, the grief etching lines into their faces. Eleanor stopped teaching. Robert retired. They moved to a smaller house, unable to stay in the place where Christine had grown up, where her childhood bedroom remained frozen in time. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt the cold touch of suspicion, but pushed it away because the alternative was too terrible to consider, the next years in Michael Barrett's life might feel familiar. He married in 1995, a woman named Jennifer Hale, a dental hygienist from Mystic, Connecticut. They met at a friend's wedding. She was kind and soft-spoken, and she believed him when he spoke of Christine, when he described the tragedy of losing someone, the helplessness of not knowing. "It haunts me," he told her on their third date. "I think about her all the time." Jennifer found his sadness endearing, a sign of depth. They bought a house in Charlestown, a small ranch with a yard and a view of the woods. Jennifer wanted children. Michael was less certain, but eventually agreed. Their daughter, Emma, was born in 1997. Their son, Liam, followed 2 years later. From the outside, they appeared to be the perfect family. Birthday parties in the backyard, Christmas lights strung along the roofline, family photographs in matching sweaters. But inside the house, behind the closed doors, things were different. Jennifer noticed small things at first. The way Michael controlled the finances, keeping the checkbook locked in his desk drawer, questioning every purchase. The way he needed to know where she was at all times, calling her cell phone repeatedly if she didn't answer immediately. The way his temper could flare over nothing, a forgotten errand, a dish left in the sink, his voice rising, his face darkening. "I'm just worried about you," he would say afterward, his tone softening. "I lost someone I cared about. I can't lose you too." Jennifer wanted to believe him. She made excuses. He's stressed from work. He's protective because of what happened. She told herself these things even as the fear grew quietly inside her, even as she began to flinch when he raised his voice. Emma was 6 years old when she started having nightmares. She would wake screaming, claiming there was a woman in her room, a woman with brown hair who looked sad. Jennifer held her, rocked her, told her it was just a dream. But the nightmares continued night after night. Emma began drawing pictures at school, always the same image, a woman lying down, eyes closed, surrounded by trees. Her teacher, concerned, called Jennifer in for a meeting. "Has Emma experienced any trauma recently?" the teacher asked gently. "These drawings are troubling." Jennifer took the drawings home. That night, after the children were asleep, she showed them to Michael. He glanced at them briefly, then handed them back. "Kids have active imaginations," he said. She probably saw something on TV. But Jennifer saw the way his jaw tightened. She saw the way his hands gripped the armrest of his chair. The marriage deteriorated slowly, like a structure with a cracked foundation. By 2003, Jennifer and Michael were sleeping in separate rooms. He became more withdrawn, spending hours in the garage, working on projects he never finished. She began planning her exit, quietly opening a bank account he didn't know about, saving money from her paychecks, researching apartments she could afford. In December of 2004, Jennifer took the children and left. She moved to an apartment in Wakefield, 20 minutes away. She filed for divorce. Michael didn't contest it. The proceedings were swift, civil. He agreed to joint custody, to child support payments. He signed the papers without argument. Those who worked with Michael said he seemed relieved after the divorce, lighter somehow, as if a burden had been lifted. He sold the house in Charlestown and moved to a condominium in Narragansett. He continued working in construction, eventually starting his own small contracting business. The years passed: 2005, 2010, 2015. Christine Cole's case remained unsolved. The investigation was technically still open, but no one was actively working it. Then, in the spring of 2022, something changed. Emma Barrett, now 25 years old, was in therapy. She had struggled with anxiety and depression throughout her 20s, experiencing panic attacks that seemed to come from nowhere. Her therapist, Dr. Sarah Klein, used various techniques to help Emma process her emotions, including guided meditation and memory exploration. During one session in March of 2022, Emma recalled something she had forgotten, or perhaps something she had buried so deeply it had seemed like a dream. "I remember being in my dad's truck," she told Dr. Klein. "I was little, maybe 5 or 6. We went for a drive, just him and me. He said we were going on an adventure." Emma's voice was distant, her eyes unfocused. "We drove for a long time. Then we stopped in the woods. He told me to stay in the truck. He got out and walked into the trees carrying a shovel." Dr. Klein leaned forward. "What happened next?" "I waited. I was scared. It was getting dark. He came back without the shovel. His boots were muddy. He told me we couldn't tell Mom about our adventure. He said it was our secret." Emma's hands were shaking. "I remember asking him why he left the shovel in the woods. He said he was planting something, a surprise for later." Dr. Klein asked if Emma could remember where this had happened. Emma shook her head. "I was little, I didn't know. But there was a pond nearby. I remember seeing water through the trees." With Emma's permission, Dr. Klein contacted the Rhode Island State Police. The call was routed to Detective Mark Ferreira, who had recently been assigned to the cold case unit. He listened to the information, made notes, asked questions. Then he pulled the file on Christine Cole. The case was reopened on April 3, 2022, 33 years after Christine vanished. Detective Ferreira assembled a team. They re-interviewed witnesses, some now elderly, their memories faded but still present. They re-examined the evidence, using modern forensic techniques unavailable in 1989. The button found near the warehouse was retested. Microscopic fibers were discovered, consistent with the interior carpet of a 1985 to 1989 Chevrolet truck, the same make and model Michael Barrett had owned. Investigators began searching wooded areas within a 20-mile radius of Charlestown, focusing on locations near bodies of water. They used ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, aerial surveys. On June 18, 2024, a team searching the woods near Worden Pond in South Kingstown found disturbed earth beneath a thick layer of leaf decay. They excavated carefully, using small tools, brushing away dirt like archaeologists. 3 feet down, they found her. Christine Cole's remains were wrapped in a tarp, her bones still partially articulated. The navy blue parka was there, faded and rotting but identifiable, her mother's Christmas gift. The forensic anthropologist confirmed the identity through dental records. She had been there for 35 years, less than 10 miles from her parents' home, lying beneath the earth while seasons changed and life continued above her. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the skull. Manual strangulation was also evident from damage to the hyoid bone. She had been struck, then choked, then buried. Michael Barrett was arrested on July 2, 2024. He was now 66 years old, living quietly in his condominium, still running his contracting business. When detectives knocked on his door at 6 in the morning, he answered calmly, as if he had been expecting them. He was read his rights. He said nothing. His face, according to the arresting officers, showed no emotion whatsoever. Not surprise, not fear, nothing. The news spread through Westerly and Charlestown like wildfire. Neighbors stood in their yards, stunned. He seemed so normal, they said. He coached my son's baseball team, another offered. He helped me fix my porch last summer. But there were others, the ones who had always suspected, who had felt something wrong beneath the surface. I knew, said Mrs. Dorothy Brennan, now 93 years old. I saw him drive past my house that morning, right after Christine walked by. I remembered it later, but no one asked me the right questions. Jennifer Barrett, upon hearing of the arrest, released a statement through her lawyer. I am relieved that Christine's family will finally have answers. I am horrified by what my children and I lived alongside without knowing. Emma Barrett's testimony became a crucial part of the prosecution's case. In her deposition, given in August of 2024, she described the memory that had returned to her in therapy. I believe my father took me to the place where he had buried Christine Cole, she stated. Her voice, preserved in the court transcript, was steady but quiet. I believe he wanted to make sure she was still hidden. I was too young to understand what I was seeing. But I remember. The trial began in March of 2025. Michael Barrett pleaded not guilty. His defense attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that memories recovered in therapy were unreliable, that after 36 years, reasonable doubt was inherent. But the prosecution built their case methodically. The timeline, the tire tracks, the button, the fibers, the unaccounted miles, the location of the remains, accessible by a route Michael would have known from his construction work in the area. Jennifer Barrett testified, describing Michael's controlling behavior, his temper, his obsession with knowing her whereabouts. He told me once that if I ever tried to leave him, I would regret it, she said from the witness stand. He said no one leaves him. Clear's throat, Denise Pomeroy, Christine's former roommate, now 58 years old, testified about Christine's plans to break up with Michael. She was afraid of how he would react, Denise said. She kept putting it off. Then she vanished. The jury deliberated for 6 days. On April 9, 2025, they returned with their verdict. Guilty of murder in the first degree. Guilty of kidnapping. Guilty of concealing a death. Michael Barrett showed no reaction when the verdict was read. He stood between his attorneys, his face impassive, his hands clasped in front of him. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Robert and Alina Cole, now in their 80s, attended every day of the trial. They sat in the front row, holding hands, their faces lined with decades of grief. When the guilty verdict was read, Alina closed her eyes and wept. Robert simply nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement that justice, delayed as it was, had finally arrived. Christine Cole was reburied in May of 2025 in a cemetery in Hope Valley, near the elementary school where her mother had taught. The headstone is simple. Christine Marie Cole, 1965 to 1989, beloved daughter forever remembered. Hundreds attended the funeral. People who had searched for her in 1989, people who had never stopped wondering, people who needed to bear witness to her final rest. The case of Christine Cole reminds us that time does not erase truth. It may bury it, cover it with years in silence, but truth remains, waiting. Waiting for a child's memory to surface. Waiting for technology to advance. Waiting for someone to ask the right questions. For 36 years, Michael Barrett believed he had succeeded, that his secret would remain hidden beneath the earth, that he could live his life without consequence. But Christine's voice, silent for so long, finally spoke through the evidence, through the memories, through the dogged determination of investigators who refused to let her be forgotten. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.